What's up, everybody? Welcome to our first webinar, and we are going to discuss probably one of the hottest topics in medicine right now, which is peptides.
My favorite.
For sure, it's your favorite. Before we get into the actual data and all the things we're going to talk about, we'll give people a little bit of time to jump on. Let's do a little introduction. So to my left over here is Justin Edwards. He is truly one of the most talented when it comes to peptides as a clinician. This is a passion of his. I've known him for several years, and this guy has done more peptides than anybody probably wants to know.
I am the guinea pig.
Yeah, but Justin's a physician assistant. He works in Optimize U Medical Clinic, where he prioritizes hormone optimization, peptides, and things like that. And so, Justin, welcome to Rebellion Health.
Thank you.
Come on, baby. So, how did you get interested in peptides?
So I did orthopedics before this. I used to cover the Franklin County high schools when I worked in Winchester, Tennessee. And I was covering the football team, and I was just hanging out with the athletic trainer some downtime. And he was a previous bodybuilder and very much into this space. And he just I can't remember what we were talking about. He just goes, "Man, peptides are the future." And I'm like, "What the heck is a peptide?" And so I didn't want to be dumb. So I went home and I started researching. I'm like, "What are these numbers and letters?
Yeah.
Like, what in the world is going on?" And then started reading about like BPC, and it sounded pretty cool. Just limited research and then like every other month a new peptide would come out, and it's like, oh well, gotta learn about that one. Gotta learn about that one. And there's still probably plenty of things I don't know just because it expands like every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we get into this tonight, one of the things to your point, there's so many peptides, hundreds of peptides. And so we want to really try to anchor this topic, this webinar around really a handful that are the most prominent right now, that are in all the news from the FDA panel recently. So we're going to talk about 7 peptides in particular. He mentioned one of them, BPC, and we'll get into that list in a minute. But how did we get to bring us up to speed where we're at with peptides in general, right? And then we'll get into these 7. But where are we at in medicine when it comes to categories, compounding, how it even ended up at the FDA this past week, and what all that means?
So peptides that are commonly used right now are like the GLP-1s. Like those are peptides. The GLP-1 exists in the body. They just modified them to have a longer half-life so that we can use them for medicine. So like those peptides already FDA approved. They've gone through rigorous FDA testing. It's the ones that we're going to be talking about tonight that have not gone through that process. Now, a lot of people are still using them, but it's one of those where we're using research-only chemicals or not for human consumption, whatever the label will say on it, to do what we kind of want it to do, kind of getting around that. But what's kind of happening now is, RFK has started where we want to be able to make these peptides with compounding pharmacies, have it approved, have it safe to use right now. That's kind of the big stonewall where we're at is like, are they safe to use? Some of them don't have the research, but I think we need that research.
Right. Which is the whole topic around how do you even get there? How do you define what is a safe product? What's the FDA, process for that? Before we get too deep into that, give us a definition of a peptide.
It's just a collection of amino acids.
It's amino acids, right? Similar to a protein, just different chains, right?
Right. It can be a 3-chain. It can be a 15. It can be longer.
Right.
And then the big issue with the pharmacies is as the chain gets longer, how stable is it?
Okay. This is just a fun question.
Oh, no.
Where are peptides from, regardless of what source you get?
Well, I mean, they all originate in the body.
Right. But I'm saying, what country produces these peptides?
China. We get them from China.
So, contrary to popular belief, when you see one that says made in the USA, let's just be honest, it's manufactured in China, and raw material is sent from China to the U.S., and then the U.S. puts it together.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
the U.S. puts a nice, cute little label on it.
Yeah. So just, let's talk about that, because I hear that question or comment all the time of like, well, I don't want a peptide from China. Well, you probably shouldn't do any peptides because they're all from it.
Well, a lot of our medicines in general come from other countries.
Right.
A lot of medicines that we use already are India, China, various countries, just because it's cheaper labor.
Right.
So sorry.
So July, and you can correct me on this, I'm going to go off memory here. July of 2023, I believe, is when the peptides kind of went from, when I first started practicing, I would use peptides. I'd prescribe it through a compounding pharmacy. And I believe, if I can recall, somewhere around that 2023 is when, during the Biden administration, they got shifted from one category to the next. So kind of explain what that meant from one category to the next, and why they all of a sudden went really what we now label kind of gray market, black market, whatever you want to call it. But how did that process happen?
Conspiracy. Well, they just put these peptides. So before, compounding pharmacies could make these peptides for use. They said, no, we're going to ban all of them. So like no one can compound them for use except for what you get gray market through China. And then that's kind of what is happening now, is where RFK is trying to get a little turnaround to where we can put them on the category 2 list, and then maybe even go further from that. So, I keep wanting to go back to the 23rd, 24th, but I'll hold back.
Well, go wherever you want, man. But I think the other thing too, just to help people understand, when we talk about pharmacy versus these peptide markets, these gray markets, really, compounding has been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. And specifically with 503A, there's different levels of compounding, 503A, 503B pharmacies, where that means that some pharmacies are geared towards producing a product that goes directly to the patient, some pharmacies directly to the clinic. So, but one of the things that's really interesting in this is they're actually trying to get this approval to go into what's called a bulk list, really, which it gives, again, that's kind of a gray area even within pharmacy, right?
Because they can make the peptide, but that doesn't mean it's FDA approved.
Correct.
That doesn't mean it's safe.
It's more like a true raw material, saying, we're not saying that this product is now FDA approved. We're just saying it goes into this new category that is on the bulk list, which gives authority for compounding pharmacies to produce them.
And then us as practitioners can then write for that peptide for the patient when it's appropriate, and then they can still take the peptide as a written prescription. It's just not FDA approved.
Right. So we're not talking about, as we get into this and going through the kind of this timeline, we're not talking about, hey, this hearing that happened a few days ago, getting these peptides FDA approved. There's likely that's probably not going to happen anytime soon, if ever, simply because of the way that medicine is kind of seen when it comes to certain types of studies, from randomized controlled trials. And most of what we have with these is animal studies, it's observation studies, it's case studies. And there's really no incentive for a big pharmaceutical company to take on, because what we all know is that peptides have been around for a really long time. And it's unpatentable most of the time when something's been out for that long.
Can you explain like a random control trial just for?
Yeah, so a random control trial is what we would hold as a gold standard in medicine. So a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trial means that you have a situation where in that trial you have investigators and you have subjects or participants, and nobody knows who's getting what. So it's double-blinded in that the patient themselves does not know if they're taking a placebo drug or if they're taking the actual drug, nor does the investigator know if they are what they're watching. So it gives you less of a bias. Now, we all know that you can still have bias and you can still have manipulation of data within these studies, but that is how we really deem what we call cause effect. When it comes to other studies from a standpoint of observational studies or retrospective observational studies, so now we're looking back at data, we're looking at those things from a standpoint of what we call correlation, right? So I could say, well, I took a look, I developed a study, and I looked back at 90 people who were on BPC 2 years ago, and I wanted to see, like, did they have improvement in gut health, right? And however I decide to do that. Well, because I wasn't participating actively during that study, right? We weren't looking prospectively or ahead, then I can only draw a correlation. So I can say, I think BPC is correlated with improvement of ulcerative colitis, but I have no way to say, well, it wasn't some other factor, that there wasn't some other variable that could be related. So it's a weaker study. So a lot of times observation studies, epidemiological studies, they'll produce hypothesis generating thoughts, but they don't give us that cause effect that we hold as the standard that comes out of a randomized controlled trial.
Yeah. It's just that that's such an important piece of information as we get into like why this happened, why it didn't happen. Because that is our standard of like, as a practitioner, we learn so much from that.
Yeah.
What is the expected results of this drug? What are the indications, contraindications, side effects? What is the dosing?
But we also know that randomized controlled trials aren't always the best, right? Like there's a lot of great observation studies that disprove randomized controlled trials. And again, it goes back to manipulation. And so I think that's where, when I look at even how we find ourselves where we're at with these peptides, the reality is we have this idea that randomized double-blind and controlled studies are now the gold standard. That's how the FDA determines whether something's safe or effective and has side effects, can go on the market. And therefore, when a peptide comes up for review and there is no study, well, what do you expect these FDA investigators to come to the conclusion? They're not, because that is the standard by which they measure, right? So it doesn't surprise me that you've got this, 8 versus 7, 8 yeses, 7 nos, because there's such a dilemma of some of these people who are on those review boards are looking at it from a standpoint, we just don't have that information. Therefore, it could not reach FDA approval.
And then it's frustrating. I was like, can we get the information?
Well, and the answer is probably no, because it's unpatentable, and controlled trials are super expensive, right? Billions of dollars oftentimes for a controlled trial. So it has to have some type of incentive for, a pharmaceutical company to be like, hey, I'm going to invest this money because as a result, 10, 15 years down the road, we've 3x'd our investment, right? And so that doesn't exist in most of these peptides. So bring us up to speed. So July 23, they got pulled off. They've been put on category 2, which is kind of the no list of compounding pharmacies can no longer make them. And then most recently with RFK, like you mentioned, that was the initiative, was to say, hey, let's revisit this. And the reason why, RFK takes a lot of peptides.
Yeah.
That dude is jacked, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got this guy who is personally like, hey, these work and I'm going to do them. So there's obviously, his agenda there, which I'm all for, but that's where we came to most recently. And they gave us a list, and let's talk about what was on that list and then kind of where we're at.
So there was a pharmacy compounding advisory committee that met, and those are the people that voted. There was also scientists from the FDA that just brought a bunch of conclusions and thoughts. And all of the FDA scientists really voted no on all of the peptides. Just for kind of what we were talking about before, we say, oh, well, random controlled trials are the gold standard and there's none. And that was kind of it.
Yeah. However, RFK stacked the deck.
Yeah.
And he put 8 people who have clinics who prescribe peptides on the board.
And I even kind of added that to like a little panel I had, because it kind of stinks that you have to do that in DC, but
you kind of have to do that.
But one guy I follow on social media, he's great. Dr. Gabriel, I can't pronounce his last name. He's amazing. He puts out a really good, I like him because he actually will tag the research that exists.
Yeah.
We won't mention another owner, but Game Day. Like
the CMO for Game Day. Yeah.
No. But different people that own stock in peptide clinics or ran peptide clinics, obviously they were going to vote yes.
Right.
It benefits them, but that's just kind of how we have to stack the deck of cards when it comes to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
That's just how the game is played. Because I was trying to look at like who did what and like why, just because I'm nosy. And I kind of thought, well, that kind of stinks that we had to bring that kind of bias to the table, but it's just necessary.
Yeah. So let's talk about the ones that are on there. BPC-157.
Correct.
TB, let's see, I don't even have the list. KPV.
Yeah.
TB-500. What else is on there?
MOTS-c.
Big fan.
Epithalon, Semax, and DSIP.
Okay. So let's just break some of those down. BPC, everybody, it's the sexy one, right? Everybody I can give some of my own personal story with that in a minute, but talk through BPC? Why is it such the rage? How do we make it? Where does it seem like it's of interest? And what do you think? Where do you think it belongs?
So with each peptide that they presented, they had to have a reason medically to approve it. So for BPC-157 was ulcerative colitis. That is something that you can take either orally or you can inject it. And then, of course, they have stacks with BPC, the Wolverine stack, Glow, Clo, all of those contain BPC. So ulcerative colitis was why they brought it to the table. But why does everyone love it? Because it works.
Yeah. And what's interesting, and I'll connect my own story here, like 2 weeks ago, I got a little bit of tennis elbow. Never had it in my life. And literally it woke me up in the middle of the night. And so I have some BPC in my refrigerator. So I go in there, and I had just listened to a podcast from somebody on this committee who's favorable towards BPC. They were talking about how and this is a problem, right? Even the dosing around a lot of peptides, we don't really know for sure, because a lot of we're kind of correlating and saying, okay, calculating from here's what this animal study saw, so let's try to apply that to a human. And so his point in the podcast was that most of the dosing is probably subtherapeutic. So I took him at his word, and I said, well, I'm going to 3x the dose. And within 24 hours, gone. Literally one, now, which is a unique situation, right? So I'm not making any claims. I'm an N of one in this case study. But my point is, that's what's fascinating to me, is that from the standpoint, it works with angiogenesis, which is blood flow to an area for direct healing. And so a lot of promise with BPC, and there does not seem to be many negatives, even though most recently there was somebody on a pretty prominent podcast who claimed that BPC causes cancer. Not factual. There's no data really helping support that. In theory, angiogenesis, if you've got new blood supply, maybe I could make some correlations there that, okay, well, if there's a tumor, sure. But there's really no data that supports that.
So, well, that goes back to not enough human.
That's right.
So for BPC-157, they actually started a random control trial back in February. We just don't have results for that yet. That's going to be pretty cool when that comes out.
Yeah.
I will say, as far as the cancer risk, because that's one of those things where when I'm doing peptide consults, I do mention that. I'll say, hey, it's not been seen in a human control study, but just to kind of see why I'll still mention it, because how it works, producing new blood vessels, if you happen to have a tumor, it could be.
Yeah, theoretically.
Yeah. So I kind of put it that way. That way, if the patient does have a strong family history of cancer, or they've had a previous history of cancer themselves, at least they can kind of make an informed decision of, do I feel comfortable doing this? With that being a possibility, even though it's not known, or whatever.
Where do you see, so again, you pointed out for these to get kind of the approval, they had to pick a diagnosis, right? So they used ulcerative colitis, which I've got some different opinions on that, because oral BPC, I feel like actually works better in the GI system, which is a supplement, by the way. It doesn't have the same criteria as this. But in the injectable form of BPC, where do you see that it seems to be the most promising? Tendons?
Well, it's a lot of acute injuries. I would love to see it just from my history of ortho, I would love to see it like a post-op peptide. I think that would be cool. If we could get like one of our joint replacement guys, here, let's try a trial of BPC after a total knee arthroplasty.
Yeah.
Like, could that increase healing time? Don't know. It'd be pretty cool to find out. But a lot of times we'll have patients come in, they've had a recent acute injury of a wrist strain or shoulder that's been nagging them, and they'll just run a trial of BPC. And
do you feel like there's so intra-articular, meaning if somebody injects something into the joint, would not advise that. However, do you feel that there's greater benefit to be localized versus just letting it be systemic? Meaning, I've got a shoulder injury, I'm going to inject it close to the shoulder versus I'm going to put it subcutaneously in my stomach.
My personal thought is systemic.
Yeah. I think it's systemic in your shoulder is my point, right?
Right.
You're not putting it into a joint capsule. So
because the peptide needle is so small, there's no way to get an intra-articular injection.
Right.
So for like ortho, we would use an 1.5 inch needle.
Right.
Where this is what, 5/8?
5/8 inch, yeah.
So really, no matter where you do it, it's only going to go into the subcutaneous space, regardless of where you put the needle. So may as well put it somewhere comfortable, like a little belly fat.
Right.
it's still going to get where it needs to go.
What's what do you see most people dosing? Is it a 300 to 500 micrograms?
I think 300 is the most common. I usually start there just
Yeah.
to kind of be on the safe side, make sure there's no reactions. Yeah, up to 300 micrograms.
I've really not seen many side effects as far as reaction. Talk to me a little bit about TB-500. Why are we using that oftentimes in the Wolverine stack and things like that? Why is that used commonly with BPC?
So that was listed under wound healing under the council, but it helps upregulate cell migration where the cells will go to the injury to help heal it. It's an anti-inflammatory. It's going to also help with blood vessel formation. So like it's a perfect combo for BPC, which is the Wolverine stack. So I think those work great together. Add copper, which
GHK.
yeah. I remember in December thinking like, why isn't this more widely used? And then the new year hit and it's in everything.
Everywhere. Nobody wants Wolverine. They want Glow.
Yeah.
Is what happens.
Well, now it's even Glow to add the KPV as an anti-inflammatory. So like everyone always asks me, should I get this or that? I'm like, go straight to the Glow. It's got all of it.
Yeah.
You got all
So
four peptides.
are you, so because KPV is on this list, so let's just talk about that. GHK we'll get to because that's on the next list in 2027. With KPV, it's more of an anti-inflammatory. So let's break this down. So you've got BPC-157, angiogenesis, new blood supply. You need blood supply to an injury to heal. That's why things like PRP and things like that are utilized, right? So it's a very similar process. On the TB-500, now you're attacking it from a completely different pathway. So now instead of angiogenesis, even though it's got some of that benefit, you're attacking what we call inflammatory mediators, cytokines, interleukin-6. So you're attacking it from an inflammatory standpoint. So that's the kind of synergistic dual effect. Why does KPV seem to have an even more kind of icing on the cake?
I think because it's a big, broad anti-inflammatory. You know, when you have that inflammatory response, you got to wait for that to kind of die down and then the healing happens.
Right.
So with KPV, it helps as an anti-inflammatory to dial down that inflammatory response to get to the actual healing. I've also seen research where that was used orally, kind of like the BPC, for ulcerative colitis and other gut issues. One of our pharmacies even combines BPC and KPV orally. Got a patient taking that for ulcerative colitis, and he's getting pretty good results for it. But yeah, add the KPV. It's going to help anti-inflammatory to kind of get past that response so the body can start the healing process. And then you just add all three of these together, and it's just an amazing response.
So, and this is, I think, what's exciting to me, because we're literally talking about 3 different peptides that work synergistically. How amazing would it be as time goes on if we have studies, right? So now you've got a study looking at BPC alone, BPC with TB-500, BPC with TB-500, and KPV in a comparison framework, right? Just truly see, like, because that matters because of cost, right? Because Clo is more expensive than one in isolation. So it's a 3-in-1. So those kind of things, that's where we need to go as research kind of continues to progress, in that we need these kind of studies looking at that. Again, it's going to be tough. It may be more of a crowdfunding, just boots on the ground, grassroots type, funding. But I think that's what you're going to start to see more of, is things like that. Let's go to MOTS-c. Okay. So MOTS-c is also on this list. I think MOTS-c is fascinating. I don't know nearly as much about MOTS-c as I do the other ones. But talk to me about MOTS-c. What is it doing around the mitochondria? What's it doing around visceral fat loss, things like that?
Well, it was proposed as obesity and osteoporosis. I was trying to figure out why osteoporosis.
I was going to say I didn't know that. Yeah,
I couldn't find out why. So, but MOTS-c originates as part of the mitochondrial DNA. It's one of the exercise mimetics. So there's MOTS-c and SLUPP332. Both of those are exercise mimetics. MOTS-c kind of just really gets the mitochondrial functioning like it's supposed to. And we all remember that's the powerhouse of the cell. So we're going to be getting energy. And to get energy, you have to grab, sugar from the blood, make energy out of it. That's what's happening. So in that process, you're going to have some insulin sensitivity, glucose uptake, and then, of course, you're going to be getting energy out of that. So now I wouldn't use that as a diet source,
right?
If you need to lose weight.
It's not a GLP.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it's one of those where I would use it more if you're trying to get a little out of your workouts. I think that's a great peptide to use.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Here's what I kind of have seen so far. MOTS-c is used in that, right? More of like a support supplementation, so to speak, from the weight loss, the visceral fat reduction. And I also see it used kind of in this overall longevity, and this is around mitochondria. So I think it's important for us to kind of explain this real quick. When we talk about mitochondria, as he just said, we're now inside the cell. So the cell has this cellular membrane. The mitochondria inside that cell acts as the energy source. It's the powerhouse of the cell. As we get older, that system, and we call it autophagy, so that what you want is in the presence of what's called senescent cells, where my body's old, my cells are old, they don't function the way they used to, but we want to have autophagy occur where that cell gets consumed, right? Our body kind of destroys it, and then we have new cellular production. Well, guess what? As we get older, that system gets a little less efficient. So MOTS-c, one of the proposes of, that where it benefits is in that idea that it actually enhances that mitochondrial production. Now, this is not on the list, but I think it's important. And again, I'll share my ignorance here because you're much more the guru. But SS31, is it connected to MOTS-c, like around mitochondria? Are you using, or is there another peptide that you would say in the mitochondrial longevity space? So I'm not worried so much about weight loss. I'm worried more about this. I just want mitochondrial improvement. Do you recommend kind of a cleansing, and maybe it's not SS31, maybe it's another one that you would say I would do that first before I do MOTS-c?
That's the new thing now. I'll admit, when I did MOTS-c in the beginning, I didn't really know about SS31 at the time. I took MOTS-c and really didn't.
I got it right. That was what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't really get anything out
Just
of it.
throwing it out
And
there,
then I'm trying to think of I think it's like Barton's disease or something like that for the SS31. SS31 is FDA approved, but it's to treat a certain disease. But I'm trying to think of the protocol for it. I wish I'm not prepared for that one. But yeah, you want to take that beforehand for a period of time, because that kind of gets the mitochondrial geared up so that when you start amping up mitochondrial function, it's kind of getting your car tuned up before you take it for a drive.
And I think that's the important part, is that the one thing that I would say that I'm probably most concerned about with peptides is because they become so readily available. I see so many people coming in and using peptides that they're not using it to the full effect. They're not using it correctly. They don't dose it correctly, or something like this, where they just haven't done the research to say, actually, if I want it for mitochondrial health, perhaps there was a better stack that I should have done on the front end. With MOTS-c, and then we'll go back to, because we didn't really talk about how to dose the BPCs and things like that. But with MOTS-c, how do you typically see that being dosed? And how long does somebody typically stay on it?
I think the difficult thing about MOTS-c is I've seen so many different protocols. I've seen a daily dose, every so many days dose. And it's one of those, I honestly don't know what the best one is.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say until
Research.
paper establishes.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I have seen, out of all peptides that I'm familiar with, I've seen more side effects from MOTS-c, and it tends to be in a skin reaction. Have you seen this?
With one person, yes.
Yeah. So I've seen that happen in a few different people. Again, they kind of came to me. It was unsolicited, of like, hey, just FYI, I took MOTS-c. This is what happened. I wasn't, I didn't even know about it. But they all had that same reaction. So I think the question then goes back to, again, we're talking about gray market, is that the way it was sourced? And we'll get into why that can be a concern, because I think that's really important for us to talk about. Or is it the actual molecule of MOTS-c? We don't know.
Or did they dilute it properly?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I'll admit, I've had those hiccups.
Yeah. Dilution. I mean, how many times have we had patients or friends be like, "Hey, man, I just got some, ipamorelin. How do you dose it?" And I'm like, well, I mean, that's like a wide range, right? I mean, I'm going to have to tell you how many milligrams are in the vial and how much you're diluting it with. I mean, that changes. So, peptides can be a little confusing around the dosing mechanisms for kind of the layperson. Okay. So we got BPC-157, TB-500, KPV, MOTS-c kind of moved into that mitochondrial, and then on BPC, let's talk about that dosing. Monday through Friday, so 5 days a week. Is that how you typically dose those, the BPC, TB-500, KPV?
When patients get it through our pharmacies, yes, to kind of help stretch it out a little bit.
Yeah.
If someone's getting it from a gray market site and it's fairly cheap, I'd say every day.
Okay.
But unfortunately, when you get it through our pharmacies, the pros and cons. The pros, you know what you're getting.
Right.
The con, you're going to pay a little extra for it.
Well, and so let's talk about that just because I mentioned it a minute ago. When we talk about the cons, the purity and sterility of a product matter.
Absolutely.
Which is why the FDA cares about stuff like this, especially, and I would have ventured to think that's why a lot of these got pushed through, at least to the next round, is because the last thing we want to do is put people in a situation where they're going to a gray market and that product is 98.8%, pure or sterile, but there's still endotoxins inside of that. Endotoxins wall off, and that creates more of an inflammatory process. So this very peptide that I was taking for inflammation now has these endotoxins in it, and it's actually wreaking havoc instead of helping. And again, it sounds minutia, right? We're talking about 2% of an issue, but it matters when it comes to a sterility and constitution of these medications or these peptides. So I just think that's really important when, yes, there is a benefit of having a pharmacy. And I haven't seen this a lot, but I have seen, I had one patient who ordered from the gray market, and they kind of came and told me this, and then they sent it off to a third-party testing site. Well, I don't even know the name of that. Well, what they ordered was not what they got. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of matters, right? Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean pharmacies can't make those kind of same mistakes, but I think it matters in regards to, can I trust that where I'm getting this is safe, it's going to be effective, it's going to have a less side effect profile. That's why pharmacies do it, and that's why they charge more.
Yep. Sometimes it's bunk. I recommended a peptide to someone, and they got it through, I think, either a buddy or a website, and they're like, I'm taking this 4 times the dose, and I don't feel nothing. And it's just like, something don't sound right. Here's mine. See how that goes.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I'm going to throw mine away.
Yeah.
That worked.
Yeah. And another way, some of these, testosterone, which is an FDA approved product for growth hormone, one of the ways that you can check is through labs, right? Mm-hmm. You can actually check what's called an IGF-1, an insulin growth like factor, and see, is it actually moving the needle? Because it'll tell you, do I have a legitimate product? So I think there's ways that you can try to see if not all peptides have that ability, but there are some peptides that you can do some labs and markers to see whether or not it's effective. All right. What's next on the list?
Epithalon. That is a Russian peptide.
Russians.
And so there's 2 on the list that originate from Russia. The interesting thing about those is those both have the most human trials, except they don't meet U.S. standards.
But they're available in Russia.
Yes, you can.
As a medication.
Right. Yeah. So you can even look at patient experiences over in Russia. So like Epithalon comes from the pineal gland. It's a longevity anti-aging. It has to do with the telomerase ends. So as you age, those telomerase ends get shorter and shorter, and then that's where you get essentially aging and then death. Right.
So the idea behind this particular peptide is, as we take it, the activity of the telomerase or telomeres is actually somewhat reverse engineering, and I don't like the term anti-aging. I think that's bogus, but the idea is it's slowing the process. I think that's a better way of saying it. So it's slowing the process of aging from a natural standpoint. Do most people, right? BPC, TB-500, KPV, you take that, you got an injury, you get better. That's a result. MOTS-c, you take it, you notice some visceral fat gains, you notice maybe more energy in the gym, you can see a result. With this one in particular, you're kind of just taking it and hoping for the best, or is there anything that people are looking for as far as benefit?
One thing that you could get that would be noticeable would be sleep, because it is the pineal gland. That's what produces melatonin. Yeah. So like if you're having sleep disturbance, you potentially could use that and then maybe have improved sleep just because you're having increased melatonin production.
Okay. And hey, and we're going to go to the next one, but let me just remind you guys, if you're watching, feel free to throw out some questions in the chat. We're more than happy to do some live Q&A. So we love talking about this stuff, but if you've got a question, it doesn't have to be about the ones we're talking about. If you just want to throw out something random, you can test Justin's intelligence. And
that sounds like trouble.
But by all means, we're more than willing to kind of go through that. All right, what's next on the list?
Well, I do want to add one.
Go ahead.
It's on an animal study. It did mention that it could add 12% to a lifespan.
12%?
Yeah. allegedly.
So that's that's kind of putting it up there with rapamycin, which is another hot topic around which is not a peptide, but rapamycin, Peter Tia. I don't know if that's a positive word or negative word in today's society, but he made rapamycin kind of popular with his book, and everybody started on that. But even in those studies, which are mostly animal, they did have some mammalian studies with dogs, but they saw like 9 to 12% improvement in lifespan. So what you're saying is this same peptide has shown, at least in an animal study, some similar results to rapamycin. Kind of cool.
But one thing, Russians are dosing it differently, where they're doing these short, intense. But now where we kind of have the peptide biohacking, they're doing these long forms of it. So I guess the question is, what's the right way to do it?
So when you say long forms, are they manipulating the peptide, or they're just doing it for longer duration?
Longer duration.
Okay.
Where
to me, it makes sense if I'm trying to improve longevity. Again, just from a theoretical standpoint, wouldn't you want to do it kind of long and slow, right, as opposed to short burst? I don't know.
Yeah.
Guess what we need to
Well, that's kind of want to bring that up. So like the Russians are doing this for like, say, 10 days, whereas biohackers might be doing this for 4 to 6 months.
Right. Okay.
What's the right one? Time will tell.
Yeah.
Which is why I love peptides. It's like the wild, wild west. We're just learning so much. You ready for the next one?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Semax, also Russian. So Selank, Semax, both are widely used for like mood, anti-anxiety, like a nootropic. They presented Semax for cerebral ischemia, migraines, and trigeminal neuralgia.
Which it has the approval in Russia for the cerebral ischemia, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. They typically use it with stroke patients and have noticed improved healing and recovery times in their stroke patients.
So you mentioned Semax and then Selank. Which one of those is more of the clarity, brain function? I think they even talked about doing getting this one approved for ADHD, and it didn't even make the list, right? Mm-hmm. But versus Selank. Selank, where do you use those two? How do they kind of differ in what patients are going to consider taking them for?
I think Selank is going to really help with anxiety, potentially even help with sleep because it can kind of help you wind down. Whereas Semax, the way it works is more of kind of getting the engine to fire in the brain. So like cognitive function, neuro firing. So I think as far as like focus to be like dialed in, Semax would be the way to go.
And this one crosses the blood-brain barrier. Correct. So how do people typically dose Semax? Is it through an injection or through a nasal spray? Either one?
Both. Russia uses it as a nasal spray.
Right.
So
a little different approach, right? A little different delivery system because it crosses the blood-brain barrier. It gets in there really quick.
Mm-hmm. So like they want it less than 6 hours of onset of a stroke for positive outcomes. Whereas here in the U.S., you can get the nose spray or you got stat.
Yeah, we won't go there.
Yeah, my stack that has like 4 of them, but yeah, you can get an injection or nose spray. Both should work just fine.
Okay. Do you typically like to do them together? Like if you're going to put somebody on Semax, do you put them on Selank, or do you just say it just depends what they're complaining of?
Both.
Like, would you do Semax in the morning, Selank at night? I guess is my question. Do you feel like they work together synergistically in that nootropic aspect?
I think logically it makes sense to do Semax in the morning and then Selank at night. But I've seen a lot of stacks, like one I've even tried where it's just together. Now when I've taken those, I didn't feel sedated.
So it came as one, like a combo. Okay.
Maybe it's a dosing thing, but like I don't feel sedated, but
but it's a calming. You said anxiety, ability to focus. So, okay, what else we got on there? Anything else?
Last on the.
We got a question. Hold on. How will this ruling affect our ability to get peptides through the pharmacy? So, great question. And it's interesting in that as this process goes, so we got the positive votes last week, where that now goes to the next phase. You're more than likely not going to see as we all know, government moves kind of slow, but you're more than likely not going to see pharmacies, most compounding pharmacies, move towards that until probably another 4 to 6 months. However, there are some compounding pharmacies that are already doing them. And so it really kind of depends on what is the peptide and then trying to navigate finding the 503A pharmacy that's already doing it. So there are a few that are out there doing it, but you will see a lot more once it kind of goes beyond this over the next 6 months.
And as far as access to peptides, nothing's really changing because this was just an advisory board. So them voting positively for 6 out of the 7 doesn't mean magically the FDA approves it. It just means in 6-8 months, the FDA will meet again and decide if they want to approve it and move it to the 503A list. So kind of right now, like nothing's changed.
Right.
Other than maybe just taking another step in the right direction, hopefully.
I do think what you'll see as a result of this is where the FDA will probably, kind of step into this is, and you've already seen it, places like Peptide Sciences, right? February of 2026, they did $7 million in revenue in 1 month. March 1st, they shut their doors. And so you're going to see a lot more regulatory impact on a lot of your peptide, gray market, because that goes back to they're trying to get this, if people are going to use it, and until we know exactly if we can put it on the bulk list in a category 1, then we at least have access to it through a reputable place as the data continues to come out. All right, so we got through the list.
Well,
there's one more.
The last one was DSIP, which is delta sleep inducing peptide. That was essentially doomed from the start just because of poor research.
Yeah.
So as soon as it was brought up, they kind of withdrew it, but it was rejected.
I think I read something where somebody who had kind of given information that they were actually going to vote for it flipped. So it was super close. I think it was 7 to 8 or 8 to 7 in rejection. So DSIP is not necessarily available, but it works on delta waves. So that's a deep sleep. So it's probably not, again, I've not used that one, so I can't speak to it, but I'm assuming based off of just that idea, it probably doesn't get you to sleep faster. It helps you stay asleep longer.
Yeah. And kind of quality of sleep.
Right.
Which with all these things that we've mentioned that can assist with sleep, when we have so many patients that have difficulty with sleep.
Yeah.
If they've already tried over-the-counter melatonin, if they've already tried, magnesium, it's like, okay, why can't this person go to sleep and which peptide would work best? And so, sometimes I kind of think through that when, discussing with patients, okay, like what's the scenario of why you can't go to sleep, and trying to think like which peptide might work best. And
let's see if we got another question. Outlook for peptides to prevent or reverse arthritis. Oh boy. Well, you're talking to two guys who come from somewhat of an orthopedic background. So I'm going to tell you, let me talk about arthritis for a second. When you look at arthritis means inflammation in the joint or within the bone itself. So hopefully you can see this, but if you look at a knee joint, for example, and this is my tibia, on the end of that bone, there sits a 2 millimeter lining of cartilage. 2 millimeters is not very thick, right? But that 2 millimeters means a tremendous amount when it comes to protection of bone, because that cartilage cap is what we call aneural. So and they've actually done studies with orthopedic surgeons where they allowed each other to scope their knees while they were awake, which sounds bizarre. And what they found was that somebody who had intact cartilage over top of that bone, when you would probe the cartilage, they could feel pressure, but there was no pain, which is why when we walk around and we have intact cartilage, it does not hurt. However, when you started to lose that cartilage, now you have what's called exposed bone, and exposed bone has tremendous number of pain receptors, which is what causes pain. That causes inflammation. So do we have something that is going to reverse and put cartilage back on the bone? No. Even as strong as, I think the most common thing that people hear about with that is stem cells, which this drives me crazy because stem cells, now they may be able to help with inflammation. They may be able to help with like some scar tissue, cartilaginous scar tissue. But as far as actually reversing arthritis from stem cell use, there's no data that shows that it works. It's an inflammatory mediator, right? And so I don't think you're going to see, I'd love it, but outside of cartilage transplants and things like that, I think it'd be really hard to mimic some way to replace cartilage.
I think the only thing you would get would be like if some awesome version of KPV that's anti-inflammatory kind of killed that pain response from the arthritis. Now you still have arthritis and awful knee joint, right? Yeah. But you just don't have pain from it.
Yeah, which ultimately is what matters, right? Yeah. Who cares what your x-rays look like? What matters is, does that hurt? Mm-hmm. And so, which is why stem cells do have some place, but going back to, yes, I think the hard part is in order to get into the joint, right? So if I've got arthritis, by definition, that's inside a joint capsule. Systemically, if I put an injection of any peptide in my stomach or even in my quad, that joint capsule is like a tight balloon. So in order to, which is why when you have a steroid injection for knee pain, where do they put it? They put it inside the joint capsule because they have to. You have to pop that balloon because once you put it in there, it stays inside there. I would not be comfortable I wouldn't be comfortable putting it in my knee at this point because you want to talk about something that can go bad fast, right? It's one thing to maybe get a little localized cellulitis on your skin from an injection site irritation. You get some type of infection in your joint, and you can end up with an amputation. I mean, that is no joke. And so I would strongly advise against anybody doing some type of intra-articular injection from a peptide, especially one that's from a gray market. I just don't think there's just not enough clinical data, and I think it's a huge risk when it comes to your risk of infections. Oh, look at you. Yeah. So and you can explain this as well, but the blood-brain barrier is what gets into the brain. So we have essentially a layer that kind of protects certain things from getting inside the brain. So not all chemicals, it has to go through messengers and passaging through from a membrane standpoint. So some medications will pass the blood-brain barrier. Alcohol will pass the blood-brain barrier. That's why you get
microplastics.
Microplastics pass the blood-brain barrier. So there's certain products or certain molecules that are small enough that actually can penetrate through the blood-brain barrier to get into your brain to have effect. Not all medications do it. And so that's what we're talking about. So Semax is one that when you inject it or you do it through the nasal cavity, it will go through that blood-brain barrier, which is where you get that nootropic benefit as a result. Perfect. All right, so give us a timeline. So we got July, we got through that. Now we've got what's next. Do you know when the next meeting is? What's that going to look like?
That will be February of 27. Oh, for the next group of peptides?
No. Oh. So where are we at? When will we know? Like truly, do we think that it'll be by the end of the year when we know for sure whether this is going to be a lot more available to compounding pharmacies?
I've not seen where they've set a date.
Okay.
It just kind of said roughly, 6-8 months.
Okay.
I'm hopefully not, if I can just keep stalking.
Yeah, it'll be out there.
It'll be out there.
What about, okay, let's talk then briefly about the ones that are going to be up in February of 27. Because GHK's on there.
GHK's on there.
That might be the new sexy one, honestly. Everybody asks about GHK.
I mean, I've been a big fan since December.
Melanotan II on there. Uh-huh. If you've ever taken Melanotan II, you know what I'm about to say, but it's awesome in the regards that it pigments your skin, so it makes you darker. But boy, to me, I can't get the needle out of my stomach before I'm like nauseated. It has some powerful, potent side effects.
What's fun is when you accidentally take it.
Oh, without knowing that you
took it.
You thought you were taking something else?
I forget what I was supposed to take, but it was nighttime and I accidentally took that one, and then I laid down on the couch next to Casey and we're watching TV, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, why does my stomach hurt? Why am I flush and red all over? It's like that.
Yes.
That wasn't supposed
to. It's immediate.
And I was like, okay, I took the wrong thing. Yeah, I had gone from the kitchen to the couch, was all of 8 steps, and I was just like, ugh.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I took the wrong thing.
Yeah, so I've even tried to do it like as I'm just getting ready to go to bed. Like I'm laying in the bed, like doing it, and like just go to sleep.
Please, Lord, help me go to sleep.
Now, I would like for my wife to take it because it also enhances libido. Okay, so there is that. Let's talk about which is a huge benefit to Melanotan II. So you've got this pigmentation of the skin, you've got libido. What are some concerns based off its mechanism around cancer? Specifically melanoma, that people are a little bit fearful of?
Well, I think the original purpose was to prevent skin cancer, but they just, in research, it didn't do that. So it acts on the melanocortin sites. And I think when it causes that, I think they're afraid of it causing a skin cancer.
Right. Or at least aggressively advancing
if you have
a skin cancer that's present. So I do think that's got enough merit. I'd be fine with it getting through, but I do kind of wonder because that's got that one is kind of known to at least have that, kind of concern. So I think we got another question. All right.
Is there any success for Semax supporting those experiencing perimenopause and wishing for improved issues with brain fog beyond hormone support currently receiving?
I think so I love the way they post that question because the first thing I'd say is if somebody's in the menopause phase with brain fog, you better fix the foundation, right? And then I would further answer that to say you probably should know what your level is of your estradiol in particular, which impacts brain fog because it may just need to be titrated. And so fix the foundation. That's how I would see utilization. I don't know that there's any strong data in that particular subset. I think it'd be fascinating to do. But I think it would be more intriguing as a provider to say, boy, that female's estradiol level's 80 and we got her where, serum levels where they need to be. All of her other symptoms are improved, but she's got brain fog. That's where I would probably consider something like Semax.
Right. And then the question would be like, because you got to remember it's being used for stroke patients. So how effective would it be? That'd be exciting.
Yeah.
Because if someone came to my clinic and that's what they want to do and their hormones were already in line and perfect, I'd be like, hey, let's do this. That's going to be exciting.
That's right. Yeah. So I think it's got some teeth to it. But again, this is why I would say I don't know that I could stress the importance of talking to people versus just trying peptides because brain fog could also be there because the patient isn't sleeping, right? So they're not getting quality sleep because their progesterone level's off, or they're anxious, or they're drinking alcohol, or they're on their screen for an hour before they go to bed. And so, yeah, you could go spend $200 on a peptide, or we could figure out actually just maybe do this differently, And
yeah, so I wouldn't have that the first line of treatment, or probably even the third or fourth or fifth. Right. But
yeah, you'd want to eliminate, potential factors that would be, causing that for sure. Great question, though. Okay. All right. So GHK-Cu, Melanotan II. What else we got coming up?
LL37.
You're a big fan of that, aren't you?
No, I'm still learning about it. It seems really cool as far as the being antimicrobial.
Is that one on the growth hormone fragment? Or no? Maybe
I don't think so.
I don't think it is. So AOD 9604. I just like saying that one. Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking about.
Anti-obesity drug.
Yeah. But LL37, is there some benefit? Because I feel like I've seen people use that one, not just for mitochondrial health and things like that, but is there some benefit there around any kind of muscle retention or fat loss? As far as combining with like a GLP or ipamorelin, have you ever seen that?
No.
Okay. So when are people using LL37 then? He's like, shut up, Josh, you're an idiot.
No, I haven't seen a lot of use in that in the patients. It's just not one of the hot topics yet. I'm sure by the time this ends, it'll be one tomorrow. Just everyone's going to want to go after it. I don't have a lot of experience with it in like patients I see. I have not tried that one myself yet. And really, the rest on the list I have not tried. So like the
Dihexa,
MGF, the Dihexa, I've not tried those yet. I really don't have a reason to try it yet.
Right. So it'd be interesting. So we'll keep getting more. So let's see what we got question-wise here.
How do you know what peptides would benefit you without just trial and error?
So fantastic question. I think there's different things you can do depending on the category of peptides. Like we talked about earlier, there's growth hormone releasing peptides. Those are things like Semorelin, Tesamorelin, Ipamorelin, CJC 1295. That can be, you can use baseline IGF-1. That's a blood draw. Then you can monitor that in 4 weeks after you've been on it to see if it's beneficial. One of the things that I like to do around this is actually look at genetics. And that's been something I'm probably more passionate about genetics than I am even peptides, because I see such a problem of people trying stuff like she just said, where it's this trial and error of like, well, I'm going to spend $500 and hopefully it works, versus looking at genetics. And there's some really fascinating data around this from a standpoint of what is your epigenetic variants, what is the allele codes, what is this DNA transcription, because different peptides have different actions, right? And so you can actually look at genetics through saliva testing. There's a lot of great companies out there. We use one called Peak Health, or they go by FNP. But there's a lot of great companies out there where you can do a genetic test. And the beauty of genetics is once you do it one time, you've got the answer, right? So you don't have to do genetic testing over and over and over. And so we use that a lot when somebody comes to me for a peptide consult, which they don't come very often because they go to this guy. But when somebody comes to us for that, I use a lot of genetics around, hey, why don't you at least find out what's going to benefit you the most? And then you can kind of build a stack or a protocol off that. But great question.
And I think getting their presenting symptoms, like what are they looking to achieve out of this peptide? Kind of get a big picture of like nutrition, what is their diet, what is their lifestyle, are they getting sleep, what are the hormones? Now, we don't always get labs with the peptide consult, it'd be nice, but and I think kind of like, what is your expectation, and is it that possible that this peptide will help with that expectation? Because I think I had a guy call, he was a diabetic, wanting to do MOTS-c for his diabetes. I'm like, that's not, really need to work on like GLP-1. Well, he was afraid of side effects of GLP-1.
Right.
I was like, well, this one's not going to.
It's not going to move the needle.
Right.
Right. So it's, again, having the understanding of like what is the condition that you're trying to treat, having that conversation, using labs to really understand. But here's the other thing. There's a lot of trial and error. I mean, at the end of the day, because of the lack of human studies, I'll have to admit that like, there's some trial and error. I think the excitement about peptides, and this is why we're on this webinar, is what I'm so impressed by is the lack of side effects. So it's a little bit of like, we take an oath, right? Do no harm. And so in that oath, it's like if I've got a medication that says, well, I'm going to give you this, but here's going to be these 15 side effects, but it's going to give you this result. Well, I'm not going to do harm, right? That I knowingly. And so the peptide world has so much really excitement because that seems to be what there's just not many side effects. And even, when they try to pull up these studies and, these investigators were arguing with these people, like they had no basis because they're pulling out like 3 side effects of 10,000 patients, right? Which is nothing. And so I think that's what excites me the most about majority of peptides. And again, I'm using that as a lump term. I'm not saying all peptides have no side effects, but I'm just saying in general, that seems to be something that is very beneficial.
And when you've got something simple like a copper peptide that someone takes and it clears up their acne with no side effects,
right?
No harsh drugs like Accutane, just a simple copper peptide.
Yeah. Or even tretinoid creams. Tretinoid creams work great, right? But it is, the kids' faces are dry as a result of that. And so that's the thing, is that you've got to be looking at it from a standpoint of, where's the benefit? Is it worth a trial and error? I think it's worth a trial and error when there's little to no side effects, when done with an appropriate provider who understands that.
Are there any foundational pieces that can increase the effectiveness of the peptides that you uncover that may be beneficial?
Well, I think anytime you look at foundational principles, and I don't care if you're looking at GLPs, I don't care if you're looking at whatever, right? Look for things that are, like we talked about earlier around sleep, alcohol, being on your screens. Look at your diet. Before you go spend $500 on, I'll just use a GLP, how about you make sure that your diet's 95% better? And so I think those are the things when you look at diet, exercise, nutrition, stress management, hormone optimization in the aging patient, those are the things that really move the needle.
Because I feel like whether it's peptides or hormones, if you're not doing the things, I mean, peptides are tools, hormones are tools. So if you're not doing the things to help the tools, you're really not going to get much out of it.
That's exactly right. Right. So it should be an icing on the cake. It should be a support, is how you really should look at it. Listen, we are super excited that you guys joined us for our first webinar, peptide webinar. We love this stuff. I think you can kind of see the passion. He's a lot smarter than I am about this stuff, but you can see the passion behind why we do what we do. And that's to give you the education, the awareness to make a difference for you. Because the reality is, as much as we care about you, nobody cares about you like you care about you. And so we want to give you the education to be aware and to make the best decisions for yourself.